Best contemporary romance book I've ever read in my entire life. It is the funniest manga series. It's the funniest piece of literature ever. That is one of the worst books I've ever read in my entire life, and I actually like vehemently hate that book. So beautiful. I'm like so obsessed with these. Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing my end of year review. It's a little bit like the mid-year book freakout tag. It's very similar questions. I kind of added some and took away some in general though from the normal end of year book tag that you see online, but it is 12 questions summarizing everything that I read, and then at the end I will just give a very brief rundown of my 2025 reading goals. So crazy that it's 2025. I know I say that in every video. So I'm not gonna talk even more about how crazy it is. I feel like 2024 went by like that. But I'm just gonna jump right into it. I don't wanna bore you with talking about how flabbergasted I am anymore. So to summarize at first, before I jump into the questions, just some pure stats for you people who are type A like me, who really love to track everything and see logically, numbers-wise, exactly what was happening. Then here are some stats, some stuff taken from Goodreads and some stuff just from my normal book tracking. In January, I read 10 books total, and I did not have any new 5-star reads. So when I say no new 5-star reads, I mean that maybe I read something as a reread and it's still 5 stars for me, but I didn't rate anything for the first time 5 stars. In February, 6 books, no new 5-star reads. March, 6 books. 1 book I counted as an entire manga series. It was 21 or 20 volumes, I believe. And so it was 6 books, but then with all those volumes included in there. And the only 5-star read for me that was new was Sky in the Deep by Adrienne Young. And then in April, I read 7 books. I had a few 5-star reads actually, but when I say 5 stars, it doesn't always mean it's a solid 5 stars. For me, because Goodreads doesn't allow you to use half stars, and that is the service that I use for tracking my books, so to speak, then I do count it as 5 stars when it was 4.5 rounded up to 5. I will try to remember and let you know if I think it was a roundup or not. But in April, I rated 5 stars The Bridge Kingdom Book 1 and The Bridge Kingdom Book 2, which is called The Traitor Queen, and also Bride by Ali Hazelwood, and The Bridge Kingdom is by Danielle L. Jensen. I believe that I rated the first book in the Bridge Kingdom series 4.5 and rounded up to 5. I think the second one was a solid 5-star read for me, and Bride, I know 100% for sure it was 4.5 rounded up to 5. But it was 5 in the end, so it still counts in my mind as being a 5-star read. In May, I read 6 books. My 5-star reads were Starter Villain, flat 5 stars, such a good book, and also Dangerous Prayers, again, flat 5 stars, really love that book too. In June, I read 6 books. Again, 6 was kind of my norm. I kept coming back to it. Maybe I'd go a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but it was kind of very consistently a lot of 6s like all around. And so in June, 6 books, 2 5-star reads. It was Fourth Wing, which was 4.5 rounded up to 5. I remember that for sure. And then The 7-Year Slip, which was an even flat 5 stars. Best contemporary romance book I've ever read in my entire life, coming from somebody who doesn't really like contemporary romance. And in July, I read 8 books. The only 5-star read that was new for me was The Unseen Heir by Kenley Davidson, book 2 in the Legends of Abreia. I'm so obsessed with it. One of my favorite books of my entire year. In August, I read 12 books. My 5-star reads were The Spy Family. I read volume 1 and volume 2 of that manga. Both of those were just solid 5 stars. Best manga I've ever read in my entire life. Absolutely loved it. And then The Ballad of Never After, which is book 2 in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series by Stephanie Garber. And that one I remember was a roundup. It was 4.5 rounded up to 5. In September, I only read 4 books and I did not have any new 5-star reads. In October, I read 9 books and my 5-star reads were Bewitched, just an even 5 stars. And also A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. That one was a roundup. It was 4.5 up to 5. In November, I read 6 books. My 5-star read, my only one, was Bespelled, which is book 2 of the Bewitched trilogy. I believe it's a trilogy by Laura Thalassa. It's not finished yet. And that one I remember was a roundup. I liked book 1 more than I liked book 2, but I still really loved them both. But that was 4.5 rounded up to 5. And then in December, I read 11 books and I had no new 5-star reads. So this all together equals 91. But as I mentioned, I combined the manga volumes into one. So technically, according to Goodreads, I read 112 books last year with a total of 36,697 pages, which I never could have guessed that I would read that much. I don't know, I've always loved to read, but this last year I got a Kindle and I just really went ham. And then to continue with some stats from Goodreads, the longest book that I read was the Bible, the ESV version with 1,243 pages, and the shortest book that I read, because Goodreads counts anything that you put on there as a book, was Ryden's Chapter by Trisha Levenseller at 12 pages. But as you can hear in the title, it's a chapter. It's one chapter from her book, Daughter of the Pirate King. And it's just that chapter in Ryden's point of view, who is the MMC, the male main character. So if you don't count that, then the actual book, as in a book that I read that was the shortest, was Dinosaurs at Sunset by Mary Pope Osborne. It's the Magic Treehouse series, book number 1, and I read it in Spanish, and it's just 68 pages. My average page length in 2024 was 327 pages, the highest rated book that I read on Goodreads. So the average rating that was the highest out of everything that I read was A Court of Mist and Fury, which is book number 2 in the Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas, with 4.66 stars. Do I agree with that? Not really. I like that book and I think it deserves 4 stars. I think I gave it maybe 4.5 stars and rounded down to 4 when I read it. This was a reread. I can't remember though the very first time I read it. I think maybe it was 4.5 rounded down to 4. And the second time I read it, I liked it a little bit less, and I think it was just an even 4 stars. Do I think 4.66 and it being the highest rated book on average that I read in all of 2024? No, absolutely not. I think I read so many more books that were so much better than A Court of Mist and Fury. And I was shocked when I saw that that was the highest rated book that I read on Goodreads. But I think it is a good book, so I understand. I just feel like I read other books that were better. And then the lowest rated book that I read on Goodreads, as per the Goodreads average at 3.30 stars, is Married to a Pirate King, Romancing the Seas, book number 1 by Athena Rose. And do I agree with that? Yeah, kind of. I did not like that book at all. And I think that it was very gaudy. It was very cheesy. It was not super well written. It definitely was one of the worst books that I read in 2024. So I do think that's fitting. I did read some books that were worse that I wish had a lower rating on average, but overall, I think that's pretty accurate for that one. My personal average rating in 2024 was 4.1 stars. Which sounds about right for me. I tend to not read a book unless I have researched it like to the death and I am 100% confident that I'm gonna like it. Sometimes I might branch out, and I did branch out with that last book that we just talked about, Married to a Pirate King. I didn't research it that much, but I was like, it's about pirates. I love pirates so much. I'm just gonna give it a go. And I don't think I should have done that. So that's what I get for not researching so much. But normally I really do research a lot, and so my average rating maybe tends to be a little bit higher than average because I really am always hunting for those 5-star reads. And so when I read something, I'm assuming it's going to be 5 stars, and that's why I'm reading it. And so most of the time I do end up reading 4 or 5-star books. Not always, but enough that my average rating for all of 2024 was 4.1 stars. The book that I read that was the most shelved on Goodreads was Harry Potter, Book 1, The Philosopher's Stone by J.K. Rowling. 13,638,378 people also shelved that book. That is crazy. Like, that's actually crazy, especially when you look at the least shelved book that I read in 2024 with only 74 people having shelved it, which is sad. That was Tiny Garden, Huge Harvest by Caleb Warnock. That is 13,638,304 people less than Harry Potter. That's crazy to me. Like, I get that Caleb Warnock is not super known, but like, you'd think, I don't know, there'd be more people than just 74. Like, the difference is crazy. And then also just my own personal stats. They're kind of disappointing, but I'm going to throw them in here because hopefully next year they will be better and then I will be able to compare them. Books that I read in German, one single book, which is sad. I really wanted to read more in German, just in languages in general, and I only read Saphir Blau by Kerstin Gier, which is the Gemstone trilogy or Time Travelers trilogy by her, and it's called Sapphire Blue in English. And I had intended to read book 3 this year, or last year, but I never got around to it, which is kind of sad that I only read one. Next year, you'll see at the end, my 2025 goals is to read more German books. And then books in Spanish, I read 2, and they were all in December, and it was the Magic Treehouse series that I mentioned, book number 1, Dinosaurs After Sunrise, and then also Harry Potter, book number 1, my most shelved book that I read in all of 2024. So now to get into the actual questions. Number 1, are there any books that I started in 2024 that I still need to finish? Yeah, I have an issue with starting books and not finishing them. And so there's quite a few. I'm just gonna rip through them real quick and not really give an explanation. Otherwise, this video is gonna take really long. Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, Atomic Habits by James Clear, and Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. The only reason I didn't finish those 2 books, and the only explanation I'm going to give for any books, are because those books were so good to me, and I just felt the need to buy them so that I could notate them and actually physically have them and mark them up and everything. And so I started reading them, and then I put them off so that I could purchase the books at the end of the year with, like, I tend to do one big book haul at the end of the year, which I did film it, so that will be on my channel sometime, whenever, I'm not sure. But I did end up getting those books, and so I will absolutely be finishing them in 2025. And then The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, Pachinko by Min Jin Lee, Tower of Dawn, a reread by Sarah J. Maas, Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb, Babel, also by R.F. Kuang, The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. That one is on Spotify, and they have this really stupid thing where you can only listen to 15 hours of an audiobook, and if you're listening to it on 2 times the speed, so that you finish, say, a 30-hour-long audiobook in 15 hours, technically that would be in your time limit, but it's not according to Spotify because Spotify sucks, and they have it so that it's the actual listening time. So it doesn't matter if you listen to it in 15 minutes, you actually listen to 30 hours of audiobook, not in 15 minutes, in 15 hours, but you listen to 30 hours in those 15 hours. And so they count the 30 hours, which is so dumb. And so I just keep maxing out my Spotify hours, and I'm not tracking them very well, which is a personal issue. And then I just never am able to finish things on Spotify, and it's so annoying. But continuing on, The Hidden Queen by Kenley Davidson, Billy Summers by Stephen King, Blue Lily, Lily Blue by Maggie Stiefvater. And that's everything that I actively, genuinely really want to finish in 2025. There's some other books that I kind of started reading in 2024 or even in 2023, and I just never finished them. And I would like to finish them one day, but it's not really priority. That's that. Question number 2, best books that I read in 2024. I'm making like multiple videos about summarizing my yearly reads and like my top 24 books of 2024. So check out my channel for those, but I will just list them off real quick. Some of the top ones are The Faceless Mage and The Unseen Heir by Kenley Davidson, books 1 and 2 of the Legends of Abreia series, Starter Villain by John Scalzi, so good, Dangerous Prayers by Craig Groeschel, The Bridge Kingdom, book 1 and book 2 by Danielle L. Jensen, the Spy Family manga, incredible. Bewitched and Bespelled by Laura Thalassa, another incredible one. Those are just the ones that came off the top of my head the second I thought of this question. Those were like the best of the best. 3, most overhyped book versus most underhyped book that I read this year. I would say, I'm sorry in advance, but I'm just being honest. I feel like by far the most overhyped books that I read this year that are so overhyped, it's Reckless by Lauren Roberts, which is Powerless book 2. I liked book 1, did not like book 2 at all. I thought it was bad. And Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros, same thing. It's Fourth Wing, or the Empyrean Saga, book number 2. So it's the sequel to Fourth Wing. I liked Fourth Wing well enough. I actually quite liked it. But I just feel like the sequel was so bad, and it was so unnecessary. It was just so long and so smutty, and I just like, there were so many things I hated about it. And then also The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I don't really like that book that much. And I feel like everyone talks about it as being like the most amazing thriller, mystery, whatever. And I feel like you could spot the ending kind of from a mile away. Maybe not necessarily exactly what happened, but enough that it wasn't much of a surprise. And the main character was just so annoying. I just hated him more than anything. Like, not a love to hate kind of situation, but just genuine hate. And the most underhyped books for sure, I already mentioned them in my favorites. The Faceless Mage and the Unseen Heir by Kenley Davidson. So good. Those are so good. Like, if you like fantasy at all, if you like fae at all, I'm not super big into fae. And this book is also not super heavy on fae, but it's enough that I feel like you kind of do have to like it to read the book and to enjoy the book. But if you do at all, you have to read these books. They're so good. And also Dangerous Prayers by Craig Groeschel. I really love that book. I feel like for a Christian nonfiction book, it is so good. And also Starter Villain by John Scalzi. That blew me away. It technically is sci-fi. It's not that sci-fi-y, so to say, though. I don't like sci-fi, but I absolutely love this book. I ate it up. And also, finally, Spy Family. I feel like that is a little bit hyped in certain circles, at least. But I feel like overall it's really not that hyped. I feel like it does not matter if you like manga or not. Even if you hate manga, you would probably absolutely love this series. It is the funniest manga series. It's the funniest piece of literature ever. It is so good. It definitely is way underhyped. Question number 4, most unique book of 2024. I didn't read anything that I feel like was super unique where I was like, oh, absolutely this one, that fulfills this question. I didn't really think that about anything, but I do have a couple that I feel like were more unique than the other books that I read, at least, and that is This Is How You Lose the Time War, and that is a sci-fi book. I just mentioned I really don't like sci-fi. I also really don't like time travel in general. If it's like old-timey time travel, that's okay, but if it's futuristic time travel, I don't know why, but I just hate it. Like, it's such a difference to me. And this one is futuristic time travel, and it's way in the future, and it's super sci-fi-y. And I hated that at first, but my gosh, though, like, when you get into it, it's really such a good book, and it is really unique. It's like two people, red and blue, and then they fall in love. I just think the way that it's written, how poetic it is, and the whole idea of it, and how it's made and everything, and the two different authors with the two different points of view is more unique than the average book. Also, The Deep by Rivers Solomon. I think what makes it most unique is the idea behind it. It's based off of a song, and it's basically the idea that African slaves, the pregnant women who were thrown overboard, because they absolutely were, out of this tragedy, some people have created ideas in the past, and then the song, which I think it is called The Deep, and it's by David Diggs' music group, and I don't know what they're called, but that song is based off of this idea that some other people have come up with, and I believe there was a short story about it way in the past, where they turned that tragedy into a really creative idea, thinking, what if when they were thrown overboard, the babies who were in the amniotic fluid already, so they were already in liquid, what if they were born then into the ocean and just continued breathing in water, in liquid? And so then what if they turned into mer people? And it's really interesting, and it's very introspective. I was not the biggest fan of it overall, but I did like it enough, and I do think that it's unique, especially just because that idea I feel like is so unique. And then I have two other books that I feel like maybe aren't as unique, but I did kind of want to mention them, and it's Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. It is a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, but I feel like it's a little bit more of a unique retelling, and I feel like the characters are really interesting, and it has this really fun, interesting fae kind of backstory to it that I found interesting. And so maybe interesting is a better word than unique, but I feel like it is a unique retelling of Sleeping Beauty. Like, it's not a happy-go-lucky, golden kind of retelling of Sleeping Beauty, but it's also not like a dark, villainous retelling of Sleeping Beauty. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. And then also The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. This is maybe not necessarily that unique, but I feel like in terms of YA books, it is unique. And I feel like it's a little bit of a gem in the YA book genre. And so I just wanted to mention it because I just feel like it's so interesting. It's such a vibe, and like the aesthetic of the book, and it's set in a kind of mythological fantasy version of the old-timey Persian Empire, and it has a literal city name that was a city of the Persian Empire, but it definitely is this fantastical fake world, and it's not real because it has this huge magical element to it overall. But it's very interesting, and it has a fairy tale kind of vibe to it, but the whole thing is just like this Persian Empire kind of idea and atmosphere, and it was just really fun to read. It was a vibe for sure. So I just had to include it. Question number 5 is biggest disappointments of 2024. I kind of already mentioned some of these, but it's The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides for sure. The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. That is one of the worst books I've ever read in my entire life, and I actually like vehemently hate that book so much. And Everything is Effed by Mark Manson. I DNF'd it. One of the only books I've ever DNF'd in my entire life. I tried to power through things. Couldn't do it for this book. Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. Sorry. A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas. That is book 3.5 in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. I kind of hated it. I feel like it was so unnecessary. It would have been okay and necessary if it was like one single chapter, but to take up like almost 300 pages where I feel like literally nothing happened, and I did not like the way that the characters were behaving to each other, like it just was such a disappointment. I really wanted a cozy book that was going to bring me back the characters and the feeling of the Court of Thorns and Roses series, and it did not do any of that for me. And then also Reckless by Lauren Roberts. I don't know if I'd say it was the biggest disappointment of 2024. I don't know if it deserves to be on the list with the other disappointments, but it was really disappointing. I kind of thought that it would be disappointing because I didn't really like the writing of book 1, Powerless, but there was enough of an interesting plot line and kind of romance, slow burn romance and everything happening in book 1 that I could take the bad writing, because I've said it before and I'll say it again, I feel like it was 10 out of 10 vibes, 3 out of 5 writing. Book 2, I was worried because just the way that it started off, the way that book 1 ended, the way that everything was, I didn't see how you could get the same 10 out of 10 vibes out of book 2, and I was right. So it wasn't necessarily a disappointment, it was just like my worries were fulfilled. Yeah. Anyways, that's enough about that. Number 6, a much happier question. Biggest happy surprise. That is for sure probably number 1, The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I don't really like contemporary romance, and this book blew me out of the literal waters. It was so good. Like, for a contemporary romance book, off the charts. It just was so wholesome and romantic and sweet, and the main character, the male main character, Yuan, had like the most incredible passion for cooking, and I feel like you just never really get to see that in a book where they have such a strong passion for something other than like reading or being an author. I feel like that's so common nowadays. And so cooking was so interesting, and he had a restaurant and everything, and he was just so sweet. Like, I just loved him as a character. Such a good book. Also, The Faceless Mage and The Unseen Heir by Kenley Davidson. Of course, I've mentioned it was one of the top books. And also continuing with the top books of the year, Spy Family, again, super big surprise how much I loved it and how hilarious it was. It was so good. Bewitched and Bespelled by Laura Thalassa, I already mentioned those books too. I was not expecting anything because I got the first book for free as part of a Stuff Your Kindle day. And I went into it knowing almost nothing about it. I read like 2 sentences from the description of it and I was like, sure, why not? And I absolutely was blown away. I loved it so much. It's one of my favorite series right now of all time. If there was less smut, then it would definitely be like top 5, maybe even top 3. But I don't really like smut, and these are so smutty. And then This Is How You Lose the Time War. Not necessarily one of my favorite books of the year or anything, but I was surprised by how much I liked it because it's sci-fi and I thought I was really not gonna like it, but I wanted to give it a chance because so many people were talking about it and I had so many friends who read it and recommended it to me, and so I was like, fine, I'll give it a go just to say that I did it, and then I actually ended up liking it quite a bit. Most Wonderful Crime of the Year. This was also really surprising because I thought it was going to be really cheesy, pretty bad, probably just a middle of the road 3-star read, but just something cozy and Christmassy for the Christmas season. And I was not expecting it to be as good as it was. Is it a literary masterpiece? No. But is it surprisingly really good and really interesting and has kind of like that old-timey whodunit Clue kind of vibe to it? Yes. And I really enjoyed it. Also, Remarkably Bright Creatures, not even remotely my genre, and I did not really like it at first. I actually soft DNF'd it, and then I picked it up like maybe a month or two later, and then when I finally finished it and finally pushed past like the first 15% or so, I was so obsessed with it, and it was so good. I think I ended up rating it 4 stars, maybe 4.5 rounded down to 4, maybe even rounded up to 5, can't remember, but it was so good, and I was surprised by how much I loved it. Then also lastly, Bride by Ali Hazelwood. Again, I thought that this was just going to be a really cheesy, bad kind of paranormal romance, like a contemporary romance, but with a paranormal vibe twist to it. And I guess maybe in a way it kind of is. But also I was surprised. I really liked it. And I thought it was so much better than what I was expecting. And I would absolutely read it again. I actually really genuinely liked it. Number 7, new to you in 2024 favorite author, John Scalzi. I still have only read Starter Villain, but it just was so good. I feel like I have to read other things from him. R.F. Kuang, absolutely love her now. Very intelligent, very interesting writing. I really like it. Kenley Davidson. I mean, I've talked about her so much on my channel. What more can I say? I love her so much. Emily Henry. Not a favorite author. I don't think I would go that far. However, I definitely have my eye on her because every contemporary romance book that I read from her this year or last year, I really liked. And I was very surprised by every single time. And I think I read maybe 3 books from her, and I don't know why I was so surprised every time. You'd think after maybe the second book, then I would just come to expect it from her, but it took me like all of 2024 to realize that I actually think if I'm gonna read contemporary romance, I'd want it to be Emily Henry, or at least someone similar. And also Maggie Stiefvater. I started reading The Raven Cycle at the end of this year, and at the end of last year, I keep saying this year. And I was blown away by how much I liked it and how much I liked Maggie Stiefvater's writing. I feel like she has a really unique, interesting, fun way of writing, and the metaphors and similes in particular that she uses are absolutely hilarious sometimes, and I just really loved it. Number 8, newest favorite characters, Anya from Spy Family. She's the little telepathic girl, and she's just so stinking cute. Memnon from the Bewitched series. I just really like him so much. Ewan from the 7-Year Slip, I already mentioned. So passionate about cooking, such an interesting, wholesome, sweet character. Leysa and Kyrian from the Legends of Abreia series, the first 2 books. Absolutely obsessed with both of them, especially Leysa. She is such a powerful, strong female character and just like 10 out of 10. She's so cool. And then also Blue, Gansey, I guess, then also Ronan and Adam and Noah and Persephone and Mara and the Gray Man and everyone from The Raven Cycle from Maggie Stiefvater. I just like really like her characters. They're very, very, very unique, interesting, well fleshed out characters. Number 9, book that made me cry. None. I did not cry over a book this year. I'm so sorry. This question always makes me feel like a little bit of a robot, like for the mid-year freakout and for this one. I don't know, I don't really cry that much, like when I'm reading. I definitely cry for movies and TV shows and like even really sad commercials. So I'm not really sure why I don't for books, but I just don't. And the last time I cried reading a book was when I read Crooked Kingdom like 3 years ago, maybe more. Like at the very end of Crooked Kingdom, like if you know, you know. Like I'm still pissed about it, honestly. But number 10, book that made you happy, I can absolutely answer that one. It's almost all of them. All the ones that were not disappointments. Number 11, most anticipated releases for 2025. I have a video coming out of my top anticipated releases because I have quite a few actually, and I just needed to talk about them. I'm like so excited to read them once they come to my library because I always get everything from my library and I'm really hoping it's not going to be super long. Sometimes if there's enough demand, I feel like my library will stock it before it even comes out. Like they did that with Onyx Storm, which is book 3 of the Empyrean Saga, the Fourth Wing book series. But then sometimes if it's lesser known or if it's a debut novel especially, then it might take the entire year, which is so disappointing. But I did make a video talking about that, so check out my channel in the future, probably within like a week or two after publishing this one. It should also be published. And then the last question before I talk about my book goals is the most beautiful book that I bought or received in 2024. And I absolutely have an answer to this. I will put my computer down. So all 3 of these are collector's editions of these books. This one is the collector's edition for Francine Rivers' Redeeming Love. And I just think it's so beautiful. It's like this beautiful shiny cover with a quote on the back. It says the compelling story of a love that won't let go no matter what. And it has this texture, like if you know, then you know. Like if you've gotten a collector's edition book before, then you know absolutely what texture I'm talking about, but I'm just so obsessed with it. It's like that almost like linen kind of texture, and I just like am so obsessed. However, this pales in comparison to the next 2 books that I got. It's a duology. I actually already mentioned them in this video. The second book in this series is one that made me cry, and that is Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. Oh my gosh. So beautiful. I'm like so obsessed with these. Pages are colored and everything, and like, oh my gosh. This is like the best book I've ever purchased in my entire life. On book 1, Six of Crows, it says no mourners, no funerals. As you can see, book 2, it says when you can't beat the odds, change the game. And not only are these like the most beautiful covers ever, I'll give you like a kind of close-up view here of what is on the front of the first book and then what is on the front of the second book here. But not only is this stunning, okay, but also the maps are colored, and also I feel like an infomercial right now, but wait, there's more. Not only that, like not only are these the most beautiful pages ever, okay, however, at the very end, there's artwork, like as if it was not already good enough. There's more, and they're different for both books. So this is the first one, and then here is the second one. Again, I'll just show you the map really quick. Stunning. I talked about these for a book haul video that I filmed that's coming out soon, so you can see it a little bit more in depth then. I will just briefly show you like 1 or 2 pages, but it's different artwork and it's so beautiful. Oh my gosh, I just like am so obsessed with it. Oh, lovely. This one even has Kuei. Like, look at how beautiful. I love it so much. This is like not only the most beautiful book that I got in 2024, the Six of Crows series, also Francine Rivers, but especially the Six of Crows series. It's not only the most beautiful book I've gotten in 2024, it's the most beautiful book I've ever had in my entire life, by far. Like, the best books I have ever purchased, and I love them so much. And again, they also have that texture on them that you can't see, but I sure wish you could. And then really quick to finish this video, I will just mention my reading goals for 2025 real quick so that you can hopefully hold me accountable. My reading goal on Goodreads is to read 104 books. That's roughly 2 books per week. There are 52 weeks in a year, and so 52 times 2 is 104. From those 104 books, I'm hoping to read more nonfiction, especially self-development and skill-building books in particular. I'm kind of hoping to read 1 per month, so that would be a total of 12 in 2025. We'll see. I would like to read more, but I'm not really sure how I'm gonna end up feeling. So we'll see about that one. But I would like an absolute minimum of 12, maybe 24 2 per month, I don't know. Then as far as languages go, I would like to read more in German, and so I'm hoping for 6 to 12 in German, absolute minimum 6 books, which would be one every 2 months. Hopefully, like, ideal goal 12, which would be 1 book every single month in German. I don't know if I want to read that much in German though, because my language is already built enough at this point where I feel like I don't need to read to get that skill building from it. And so it's kind of just more for reading for pleasure, which German is not necessarily my go-to language when I want to read for pleasure. I'm sorry, it's just the truth. And so I'm thinking it might end up being more just 6, but I do want to push myself to just not read only 1 book in German per year like I did this year. And then for Spanish, it's an absolute minimum of 6 for me, ideally 12. And that one, like, I really do want to hit 12 because I really do need the help. My Spanish level is nowhere near my German level. I would say I'm intermediate in Spanish and I need all the help that I can get. And so absolute minimum of 6 books, 1 every 2 months. Really, hopefully, ideally 1 per month, but I don't think that my skills are up to that level. I think if I read 1 Spanish book per month, that would have to be one of the only books that I read that month because I would have to really devote so much time and energy to it. So I'm gonna start with 6, and then hopefully by the halfway point of this year, my Spanish will be good enough that I'll be able to read books quicker and a little bit more similar to my normal level in English or in German. And then maybe for the second half of the year, I'll read 1 per month. I don't know. That would then end up being 9 books. So I'm writing down 9 books on my own personal goal, like calendar and vision board. But in my mind, I know that it's minimum of 6, maximum, well, not maximum of 12. If I want to read more, I can. But like maximum goal that I'm really aiming for, 12. If I get more, that would be amazing. So that is everything. I hope that you guys had an amazing end to 2024. I hope you hit all of your reading goals, and I hope that you have an amazing start to 2025 and hit all of your reading goals this year also. And I will see you in my next video then. Bye.